Good day, everybody. My name is Brad Steele. I'm the Senior Director of Unified Communications for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and a past president of the National Association of State Technology Directors, or NASTD. I welcome you all back to the IT 101 series. Many of you know the story, but for those of you who don't, while I was president, I was reading through the NASTD Constitution and the guidelines that come with the association, and something stood out to me. Article 1 of the NASTD Constitution, Section 2, Purposes and Goals, states that we should engage in programs for the training, education, and development of technology professionals from all areas of state government. Along these lines, we decided to put together a set of educational videos that we call IT 101 to help with this education. We ask industry leaders some standard questions about technology services or business practices. And if you haven't seen the other videos that we put together, I ask you to go to the NASTD website and you can see the videos there, and it'll bring you over to our YouTube channel. And I ask that once you're on that channel that you please hit the subscribe button. We're looking to get 100 followers so that we can get a customized YouTube link. So, and again, if you haven't seen those other videos, there are quite a few of them out there now, and they cover a lot of different topics. But this week's session, we're talking about the journey to the cloud and kind of, that next step of getting there. We know that all of the states have at least dipped their toes in the water. Some are fully in the water. Others are slowly making their way in. So we wanted to get some good information around the topic of that cloud journey. So another topic that is so important and so large that we actually bring two subject matter experts on board. So with our discussion today, we will have Tony Insenius and Stephen Sharp. So Tony Insenius is the Chief Technology Officer for Public Sector and Defense North America for Atos. Prior to his transition to the private sector, Tony was the CTO of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and the CIO as well. Tony is a retired naval officer who, with over 30 years experience in information technology with the Department of Defense, state government, and private sector. And a fun fact about Tony, and if you can't tell from his video background, Tony has more guitars in his house than my local guitar center.
Might be true.
So, and then with Tony, we have Stephen Sharp. He is an advisor focused on the delivery of cloud-centric strategic transformations. Stephen has over 25 years of IT experience, with the most recent 10 years focused on enterprise transformations in the media, healthcare, and software industries, leveraging major cloud service providers to enable IT organizations to mature and accelerate services and strengthen business alignment. He's passionate about strategic planning, target operating model development, and process improvement. And he serves locally as a director on the board of the Knoxville Technology Council for to further the evolution and development of technology-focused and enabled companies. And a fun fact about Stephen is that he spent most of his military career working under a pineapple field. So can we get a little more on that, Stephen?
Yeah, Brad, I was while in the Army, I was stationed in Hawaii, and I worked in an underground facility there as under a pineapple field for a little over 3 years. It was a great experience, part of military intelligence, and that's where we hung out all day.
Did you get to share in the fruits when you were leaving at the end of the day?
Unfortunately not. The only way I actually discovered where I worked was one day we had a fire escape practice drill, and sure enough, the route led us up through. We opened a hatch, and there we were in the middle of a pineapple field. So it's pretty exciting and interesting to learn where we were.
Excellent. People wondered why you carried a machete in your car. And All right, so back to our journey to the cloud. As I said in the opening, it seems like the states that when we were in Seattle, a lot of the states were talking about it, and we still have multiple layers of different organizations. Some that have gone all in on the cloud and seem to be trying to get as much as they can out there. Others that are being a little more pragmatic, and some that are being darn right stubborn. Let's just call it that. But so they're in different journeys. So the first question I would say, and to you, Tony, is, from coming over from Commonwealth of PA and your dealings with other states, where do you see, the cloud journey going?
That's a really good question. And I think, I really like to set like a foundational statement here. I gave a presentation or I moderated a panel on cloud computing in Seattle. And one of the first things I wanted to make sure that we established really was the definition of what cloud was. And I read the NIST definition word for word. And really, cloud is really a model, an operating model from an IT perspective. It's consuming IT resources. And it comes like ice cream, right? It comes in different flavors: strawberry, chocolate, vanilla, where you have public cloud is a flavor, you have private cloud as a flavor, and you have hybrid cloud is another flavor. And all those flavors are different, and there's different processes and there's different methods and how you need to be successful in going forward. This conversation is going to really focus on the public cloud journey. And the reason I thought this would be a good topic for this one-on-one session is I had the opportunity to see Stephen and Vinky in Florida give this presentation to several of the Florida agencies. And I got an aha moment and said, wow, this is really good. This is really breaks it down, kind of gives the fundamentals, the do's and don'ts. I mean, even if you're already tipping your toe, as Brad said earlier, these are really some good foundational strategies on how you can move forward and really be successful in your cloud journey, because there's a lot of steps, a lot of minefields that are present during this cloud journey, and a lot of things that you thought you knew you don't know, and a lot of things you don't know that you thought you knew a lot better. So this hopefully gives you some insight, some information to really start drafting a plan, a go ahead to really make you successful on that public cloud journey, not your private cloud or your hybrid cloud, but your public cloud journey. And I think, Stephen and he's going to give a really good presentation and some really good information. So hopefully folks will take notes and, download this video for future reference. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Stephen. He's the smart guy in the room, and, let him, kind of talk about, what made me say, yep, this is a good idea. Let's have a one-on-one session with Brad.
Excellent. So Stephen, to that point, if we've made that, that initial decision, we're going to start moving to the cloud. We're going to start taking this journey. How will it impact our organization, our IT organization, and what other functions outside of IT will be impacted, and how?
Yeah, that's a good question, Brad. And I've had, fortunately, quite a few years of experience in different companies in doing this kind of thing. And the biggest piece, the biggest hurdle to get around and to get buy-in on, of course, is just that big resistance to change. And that's a general challenge with any kind of big change an organization may take on, but the cloud tends to bring about a lot of that resistance. I think people start looking at where all is this going to impact me, and how will this impact me in the long run as far as my job? Will this still be the same, or how's it going to change? And so with that in mind, having a good, well thought out organizational plan is very critical to the success of your migration. And there are some areas I would say that are key as you're planning that change, to consider, for example, the skills of your staff, and make sure there's a plan in place for them, and they understand that the skill sets they have today will apply as they move forward, and help them see that path to get from where they are today to where they'll need to be to help support the organization in the future. But other areas include, the tooling that the organization uses for operational management, for any kind of security automation and deployment automation and things like that. But you also have to take a look at all your governance best practices and policies you have in place, and make sure you adapt those to work in the cloud. and work with your HR department to ensure you have good updated job titles and job descriptions. And also procurement process is a really big piece. In the cloud, of course, your ability to spend is much easier and can certainly get away from you if you're not staying on top of it. So ensuring that you work with your finance organization and have a good procurement process in place. And lastly, of course, taking a look at your PMO, your project management organization. There will be new opportunities to approach projects and potentially speed those up. So you want to make sure you have good processes to align and really take advantage of the capabilities that you'll have when you move to the cloud.
So Brad, I'd like to really chime in real quickly because both you and Stephen said cloud as a general term. And I want to make sure that folks listening to this is public cloud. This is going to be talking about the transition to public cloud. And, and cloud is not public cloud. Cloud is, again, an operating model, encompasses multiple flavors of private, public, and hybrid. And other, infrastructure as a service, public software as a service, platform as a service. I mean, go ahead and read the NIST definition. That is cloud. It's just that we're talking about public cloud in this session. And I know everybody says cloud and everybody assumes public cloud, but I just want to make sure that when we say cloud, we understand that there is multiple versions of it.
Thank you. I'll try and remember that as I move forward. But I know that one thing, Stephen, that you touched on was the staffing and the skills. And in your notes when we were talking, you had work with your HR department to align job titles and job descriptions. I have a very specific person within our organization when we were moving our email out to the cloud, and the big concern was, I'm going to lose my job. And, the organization kept saying to her, you're not going to lose your job. You're still going to have a place in the Commonwealth. And she said, yes, I am going to lose my job because this is what I do today. I'm an Exchange admin. I, work on Exchange servers on premise. And it was, the explanation and the description of, yes, you're still going to have a job, but it is going to be a different job. So I think that's critical that when you're moving to the cloud and moving to the public cloud, and when you're making this transition, that you are having those discussions with your people. I think that's critical. So, so with the impacts that we discussed and to the organization, is there a tested model to make adoption more efficient or more effective within your organization?
Yeah, a very common approach that I've seen to be very successful, and I've used myself in every one of these transformations I've been a part of, is a Cloud Center of Excellence. This is where you bring together a group, an executive sponsor or someone who has a senior responsibility for the success of this, as well as an internal champion. And you align the key resources necessary to make it successful. You bring them together to be a part of this group, this movement, and to help design every area in a very engaged way. So a good example of this would be to bring in, say, your finance folks, as mentioned previously, how much procurement processes are going to change, and cost management and budget planning. Bring in a finance person to be a part of your center of excellence for public cloud, and to make sure that as you're designing that and reviewing what's possible is from a reporting perspective and a planning perspective and a management of your costs or of your cloud spend, and make sure they're a part of that design, and they will ensure, of course, that the best practices that you roll out are something that they're bought into. And that way, as you move each of these pieces to the cloud, each of your processes to the cloud, the right people are involved and they're bought in, and they're going to help make sure it's successful, and they're going to help make sure they're getting what they need out of it to make the most of it as you move forward.
And is that's from the IT side, but also I'm assuming you want to have the business involved as well, right?
Absolutely. You want obviously all your IT functions to be a part of this, your development teams, your database, your systems, your network, security, but you also want to make sure your finance, HR, and any business owner that could be engaged in this, any functional department that leverages IT resources heavily should be engaged in some way in this Cloud Center of Excellence to make sure their areas are covered and their needs are addressed as it moves forward. And they're also bought in and helping to make sure it's going to be a success.
Okay. So what are some of the common strategies that you see organizations taking when they move to the cloud? The public.
You know, when organizations begin to make that move to the public cloud, they've got to look at their application portfolio and really think about what's going to move and when and how. So there's an approach that's often used referred to as the 6 R's. And to walk through those, first one is rehost. And this is one we see most commonly used. It's referred to as lift and shift. So simply taking application that's currently hosted in a data center and moving that application with very little to no change up to the cloud. Another one is re-platform. So this is just minor adjustments. This is maybe you need to upgrade an application server or web server to get it up to date to operate in the cloud, but that's really about it. You're not making any significant changes. Repurchase is another. So this is one where you're going to probably be replacing a product that you use. Maybe you have a customer relationship management software, for example, that you've been hosting in your data center for a while. And you're going to take this opportunity as you review the pros and cons of continuing to host that yourself or moving it to the cloud and say, you know what, this is a great chance potentially to move it to a public SaaS provider. Another one we see is refactor. Now, this is a much bigger deal, and this is where you're literally going to go in and potentially recode the entire application to take advantage of the cloud in a more significant way. We see companies generally do this more after they get there. They're in the cloud, they've done the lift and shift maybe, and now they're ready to really mature and advance and really take full advantage of what's there. Of course, retain is an option, and that's where you're just simply going to keep the product right as it is and where it is. Maybe there could be drivers, for example. We see some cases where maybe it's a legacy application that's really not geared well to move to the cloud. Maybe it's going to be retired in a few years, and you don't want to go through that kind of effort for that particular product or application. And then the last one we do see is retire. The 6 R's, that retire is a case where you really, a lot of folks at times don't take the time to really review their portfolio really well. So this is a great chance to review it. And sometimes they find that maybe they have a product that isn't really needed anymore or can be replaced with other functionality with other products that are already there.
Yeah, so whenever we are looking at moving something or doing something, we look at what's the best case for that. If you have something that's tried and true and working, fine. But if you have anything that you need to clean up, that sounds like that would be the time to make those changes and make that business improvement, right? Excellent. So once we start migrating to the cloud and we're getting there, where do we go? What do we look at to drive continuous improvement? How do we look to make it better as we go?
Well, the first thing I would mention there is cost management. A lot of folks want to get there and start leveraging those resources, and they find a great bit of freedom and opportunity to really max out capabilities. But what sometimes you don't see the engineering side necessarily focusing real tightly on the cost. So it's a great opportunity to get the cost managers together, finance folks, your IT resources, and really take a look and make sure that you're got a good cost or financial management plan in place for your public cloud. Make sure you're taking advantage of the right kind of spend there. Most public cloud providers offer some kind of reserved instance or some type of a discounted spend, and make sure you look at those, make sure you've got things right size. Maybe you thought you needed a certain size when you moved, but after you got there, you learned that you could get by with something much smaller. Make sure you're taking advantage of scaling. There are different opportunities there. But also, your governance maturity, best practices. There's a very good idea of once you get there to make sure what you thought would make sense before you went there still does apply. So take a look at those and make sure that if there's any opportunity to improve, it's a great chance once you're there to really make sure those are in place. Security, of course, very critical that we ensure that our security practices apply very well in the cloud, public cloud, as they did in the data center, and look for opportunities to improve those. There are many security tools that are available in public cloud offerings that you may be able to grow your capabilities from what you had on-prem. Of course, your talent, skills, evolution, great chance to take a look at your staff again once you're there. Maybe there's some advancement that you want to take place with your staff so that you can continue to mature your capabilities, grow your automation capabilities, and really get into that what we talked about with the 6 R's, the application, transformation, and modernization. So now you're there, you've been running. Maybe you've got a good chance now to go look at some of those applications that you did a lift and shift on and say, hey, there's a chance for us to go automate these, modernize these application stacks, make them more performant, make them more automated, make them more resilient, things like that.
All right, so I'm going to go, away from what we originally talked about, because I do have to touch on one thing here. We thought so much about security within our organization that we actually put it in our name. Are there any security concerns when we're moving to the cloud that we need to take into consideration, and what's the best way to kind of mitigate that?
Yeah, so certainly, going to the public cloud, you've got a much more expanded breadth. You're going from your 4 walls of the data center, perhaps, and you're moving out to this vast public cloud area with certainly all kinds of entry points that you need to consider. So that's really the key here, is considering all the entry point possibilities and ensuring that you've got the right lockdowns in place. Your identity access management, very critical, as it always is, but that's certainly another area that's I would say you really need to focus on as they move to the public cloud. You have a lot of control capabilities there, and just making sure you really take that approach of least access necessary to do what you need to do.
So Steve, if I was still in the CIO role, one of the things that you had mentioned before, actually, there's 2 things that caught my attention, and perhaps maybe a little bit more explanation, a little bit more detail would be helpful here. One of them being, the costs associated with public cloud, or the perceived cost savings of public cloud. Can you define those and really explain how to maximize those savings, if there are any, because they may not be any? It's really, it's situation by situation. And the second one is the skill sets that are going to be required to transition to manage your public cloud environments, because it is a different animal, it is a different skill set. And what do you suggest from a strategy perspective for folks to plan on what skill sets are going to be required? Do they have them in-house? Do they get them from a provider, a service provider? Kind of touch base a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So starting with the cost one. So you're right. A lot of organizations perceive that there's pure savings to moving to the cloud. And that's, as you said, not always the case. It's really a case-by-case basis, and how they're currently spending and managing their IT infrastructure costs. But it's really the big picture you have to look at when you move. There are opportunities to save, for sure, and it's something that you have to be on top of. There are many ways to approach savings, from everything from your contractual agreement, of course, with your cloud provider, to taking advantage of reserved instances or other discounting opportunities. You have to look at, of course, scaling is very critical here. Do you still need that super large server to cover that spike in need from time to time, or can you get away with a very small one and set up some auto elasticity, auto scaling capabilities, where you can just scale out to cover those short spikes through the year and then scale way back. There's, automation opportunities is a big piece of it that's often overlooked, but also something I've seen quite a bit is going back to something I said earlier, where companies will move or organizations move things to the cloud and then don't really go back to look at whether or not that was the right thing. If they move to the right size, for example, of instance in the cloud, if they go back and set a regular cadence, whether it's weekly or monthly or quarterly, whatever makes sense for them, but to ensure that you're going back on some regular cadence to make sure that you are scaled appropriately. Make sure you're not sitting out there spending a couple $1,000s a month on an instance that could be covered with a $200 a month instance. So it's organizations who take the time to and invest in it's referred to as a FinOps capability, a financial operations capability, tend to get the most out of this. And there are tools that will help with this, and many tools, from those tools that manage discounts to make sure you're leveraging the right discount opportunities, as well as tools to make sure you're right-sized. And the CSPs offer tools to help you as well. You need to take advantage of all those to make sure you're keeping your cost in line and really getting the most out of it. And I'd say that you may or may not save money going to the cloud. That's really depends on where your current costs are and how well that's being managed, for one thing. But you certainly can optimize your spend once you're there, and you want to stay on top of that.
So it's safe to say that it's a little bit more involved. You have
absolutely.
to be very, very proactive in cost management here when you're in your public cloud journey.
Absolutely. And ideally, when you talked about skills, for example, one of the skills is ensuring that you have some key folks in your engineering teams, for example, those who are going to be working in the cloud regularly, that they have a good understanding of cost. And when they launch an instance or a service in the cloud, that there's a cost associated, and make sure that they're thinking through that and keep them. I built lots of time spending with our finance folks in my past organizations to make sure our IT teams and our finance people work together. And when IT was going to launch something big in the cloud, we worked with finance to make sure they were aware of what's going on and why. And we worked together to make sure those costs were aligned in the budget and being managed to be as optimal as they can be. And so that's one of the skills. You mentioned skills as another thing. That's one of the skills I'd highly advise organizations to invest in. Make sure you have someone or a team on staff that is highly skilled in cost management in their cloud provider. Other skills, automation, of course, is really one of the keys of getting the benefit from the cloud. So investing in all of your areas really of IT, from your software engineering to your infrastructure team, your operations teams, your engineering delivery teams, in ways to automate your software or your code, your infrastructure, or your product delivery, your software delivery. Taking advantage of the automation that's there will really, to me, that's the key to success of being in the cloud. You can really automate your recovery times. You can automate your elasticity, so you address scaling, keep your performance higher. You can really reduce a lot of the more mundane operational tasks that we've had to do historically, so that your team can also focus on more innovation. And certainly that's where we want to be with technology, looking at the next thing that's possible. So from a scaling perspective and how to scale up, there are really a couple of things I'd recommend there. If you're, depending on where your staff is with the move and how skilled you are internally, if you're kind of starting from scratch, I would recommend that you look for a good partner to help you ramp up and work with you and get you to where you want to be. And also the CSPs offer some great training plans, great training programs. So working with that partner and the good relationship with the CSPs, they can work with your organization, determine where you're going, and help you kind of get that gap analysis of where you need to be, and set some competency building plans for your team and help you get there.
Awesome. All right. So again, from a person who is a telecom and network guy at heart, the term I hear all the time. So modernization of applications So what does it mean to modernize an application to be more cloud native?
Yeah, so it really goes to leveraging systems and services that primarily or solely use platform as a service, PaaS, and cloud functions with the use of infrastructure as a service, or IaaS, minimized. So our goal there is, I'm sure we've all heard of that term, infrastructure as code. It's really getting to a place where less systems, traditional infrastructure folks having to be involved just to get infrastructure set up or scaled, where we're building our applications in a way that they can really code infrastructure as it needs to grow or scale or as it's deploying. And another thing is having highly automated and regular releases from a DevOps model using continuous integration and continuous delivery pipelines. That speaks to, once a developer has written some code and they've checked it in, we want to get that to a point where all the testing that's necessary, from a quality perspective, a performance perspective, a security perspective, is automated. And once that check-in's done and the tests have been passed, it's ready to launch. And of course, it'd be up to the organization on how often or how quickly they want to do that. But ideally, you want to be able to get that to a point where it can happen at any time. Once a piece of code is tested through successfully, it's ready to launch. And those are really a couple of key areas to be able to say you've modernized your applications.
All right, and you've talked, a couple of times now about automation. So if you're wanting to become more automated in your application delivery, what are some key steps that you should have in place?
Yeah, so you're going back to what I was just saying, the build automation and source code management. And this comes down to software developers collaborate and work in parallel without creating confusion. So traditionally, we've had many cases where software developers will work on a single unit, and they're really just focused on, let me just get this unit out, and each one's kind of doing their own thing, and eventually you try to pull it all together and then test the whole thing. In this case, we want to kind of that DevOps mentality where everyone's working together, they're having regular meetings, and it's really more lockstep in what they're doing. Continuous integration, so automatically merging changes from multiple developers into the baseline source code repository. So again, going back to that, instead of a unit-based, it's more of a complete app focus. Application deployment, configuration management, so manage system installation and activation, patches and updates, and infrastructure deployment, as we were just talking about. Enable a declarative description and instantiation, bare metal and virtual hardware stack. So this is about the infrastructure as a code, kind of that final piece in place.
All right. So what results can I expect to see with an investment in DevOps automation?
So, benefits of a good DevOps automation capability would include improvement in product quality, because you've built in that testing necessary to see a good quality product when it launches. Improved performance of the software. Of course, that plays on the previous one. If you've got good quality, you're most likely going to see good performance as well. Minimal cost of production. So we've got all this built in together and automated, then we're leveraging what we need when we need it. And when we don't need it, we've got things spun down. We're not wasting resources there. Of course, reliable infrastructure manages by code. So I've spoken about that a couple of times. I know I've mentioned, but if we've got that infrastructure automated in a way that we have tested, obviously, thoroughly, we've tested with our software launches, we've got good reliability built in. And improve productivity. This goes back to the kind of the dream goal. We want to spend less time operating and more time innovating. So if we've got this much automation in place, once you get to that point, you find especially some of those key resources who are capable of kind of coming up with the next great idea, whether it's an improvement in a current product or a product that we haven't thought of yet that we need to be doing, more time for that. And of course, faster deployments. That's really kind of one of the fundamental blocks here is that you're able to move faster because you've got the right automation and testing in place. And of course, big piece for operations side is improved mean time to recovery, faster problem solving abilities, and just when there is an issue, we've got the ability to put that fix in the deployment pipeline and get it launched as quickly as possible through all the testing that we need.
All right, so we've come towards pretty much the end. So I usually ask the one question at the end every time, which is, what did I forget to ask you? What did I forget to say? But for you, I'm going to say, what are the key takeaways that we have? What do we have to keep in mind in our cloud journey?
Yes.
Excuse me, our public cloud journey.
Yeah, the first thing I would say is, going back to my very first discussion there is, don't replicate current state. Look at this as an opportunity to leverage the benefits of the cloud. There is a lot of opportunity there to do things differently and in a way that should really enable your organization to spend less time doing a lot of the things that don't necessarily create a lot of value, and more time being more innovative and looking at ways to operate, to build new products, to just do things in a totally better way. So don't try to just do what you do today in the public cloud. Look at ways to make it better once you get there. Another thing I would say is, as you are planning this out, or as you're planning improvements once you're already there, ensure that you always include your key stakeholders, not just your IT key stakeholders, but your organization key stakeholders. There are always opportunities from finance, from operations, from products. Be sure to pull in those key folks every time that you take this opportunity to look to continuously improve, or just planning your original move, and include all those right folks. And that's not just about creating a good move to the cloud, but it's also about getting good buy-in with the organization and helping everyone be a part of it, a part of the solution. And kind of along what we were talking about before, this is true with not just your DevOps, but with your security ops, your core ops with the operations, or your FinOps with financials. Leverage agile methods and tools to set the tempo and aid in communications, accountability, and decision tracking. This will help you be able to find opportunities quickly, deliver those, test those, and figure out what works and what doesn't. And if something doesn't work, you'll learn it quickly and be able to move on to the next thing. And lastly, I would say, empower the team with the ability to make decisions and resolve disputes. The technology's there and good processes in place. Now, if you empower your staff to be able to do something with it, set good guardrails, but give them plenty of room to be able to make things happen, you'll generally see great things.
So Brad, if I can say one final comment, we jokingly, we're kiddingly about cloud, public cloud, because everybody does it, right? But it's coming to a point where, and here's a real life example that I can point to, and I'm sure my friends there in Texas won't mind me give them a shout out. They're doing some really good things in Texas. Texas, if you mention the word cloud to Texas, they're going to say, where? What cloud? Is it my Texas private cloud, or is it the public cloud? That word does not, that you have to really break it down. And and more and more states are going to get to that, but because it's going, we're going to have a mixture of public and private. It's like this. It's going to be like this, and the discussion for whether it's going to be in a private cloud on-prem, or in a colo, or in a public cloud, which is shared resources with other customers. Those are different conversations, different skill sets, different processes, different governance. So that's why,
and different use cases.
Yeah, and that's why I really kind of want to sound like a broken record, that you have to really, when you say cloud, which one? Because I'll ask you, which one are you talking about? Is it public? Is it private? Is it hybrid? What are you talking about? Because now as a service provider, working for a service provider, it means different things to us, and it should mean different things to the audience that's listening as well.
Awesome. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much. I told you this would be painless. Every time I do these, I come away with the same feeling, which is, wow, I'm so much smarter than I was 40 minutes ago. And hopefully that's the same for the folks that are watching. Again, if you're watching this, you're on YouTube and watching this, please hit that subscribe button. We really appreciate it. Thank you for being part of the NASTD organization. And, thank you for participating. Once again, I'd like to thank Tony Insinius and Stephen Sharp from Atos. So thank you, gentlemen, for your time. And we look forward to seeing you on our next IT 101 series.